Welcome back for another deep dive. You know how much we love to really get into the nitty-gritty of a topic, and today we're going to be doing that with a book all about business and math.
That's right. The book is The Underlying Logic II by Lou Runn, and it's kind of about how math can unlock those secrets of the business world, you know?
It sounds a little counterintuitive at first, like math and business. Aren't those two completely separate worlds?
Well, that's what I thought too, but Lou Runn really makes a compelling case. Like, have you ever wondered if there's actually like a formula for success?
Especially for, all those entrepreneurs out there.
Yeah, exactly. And well, Lou Runn actually introduces this concept called the entrepreneurial success formula.
Okay, I have to admit, I was pretty skeptical when I first heard that.
Yeah.
But the way that he connects this math to things like emperors and, huge tech giants, it's kind of mind-blowing.
It really is. And it all starts with a very simple question. How can we increase our chances of success, especially when things feel so uncertain, right? Like so much of business is about taking risks and dealing with unknowns.
Right.
So the entrepreneurial success formula, it actually provides a framework for thinking about this. And it states that your overall success rate is equal to 100% minus, in parentheses, 100% minus your basic success rate, all raised to the power of the number of attempts.
Whoa, hold on. That sounds a little like a mouthful. Can you break that down for us a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Think about it this way. Even if your chance of succeeding at something on a single try is low, the more times you try, the higher your overall chance of success becomes.
Oh, okay. So it's not just about, trying over and over again blindly, but it's about recognizing that each attempt feeds into that overall probability of actually achieving success.
Exactly. It's like each attempt is like an input. It changes that overall outcome. And Lou Runn actually uses a rather intriguing historical example to illustrate this. He talks about emperors in ancient China and their large harems.
Okay, I have to admit, I'm kind of wondering where this is going. How do harems connect to business success?
Well, think about it. Having a large harem meant a greater chance of producing a capable heir to continue the dynasty. It's about maximizing the number of attempts in that formula we just discussed.
Oh, I see.
The Kangxi Emperor, for example, he had 24 sons. This abundance of heirs ultimately led to this fierce competition for the throne, which is known as the 9 sons seize the throne.
So in a way, the emperor was increasing his odds of having a successful heir by, having more options. But how does that translate to the business world today? We're not exactly building dynasties in the same way, are we?
No, but the principle still applies. Think of Tencent, the company behind WeChat. They implemented a strategy called the horse racing mechanism, where multiple teams worked on similar products simultaneously.
Oh, interesting.
And this internal competition, much like the emperor's multiple son strategy, aimed at maximizing the chances of at least one team hitting the jackpot.
So instead of putting all their eggs in one basket, they had multiple attempts running concurrently. So if we connect this back to our listeners' everyday work lives, this formula seems to suggest that maybe taking on multiple projects or exploring different approaches could actually increase their overall chance of hitting that, that big win.
It's definitely a thought-provoking way to approach your work strategy. Rather than getting stuck in a single track, consider how diversifying your efforts might lead to a higher probability of success. Now let's move on to Chapter 2, where Lou Runn takes us back to the basics, the 4 arithmetic operations.
Wait, you're telling me that simple addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division hold the key to understanding complex business scenarios?
I'm intrigued, but also a little surprised.
You might be surprised how much insight you can gain from understanding those very foundational concepts.
At the core of any business are its financial statements, and those are essentially built upon addition and subtraction.
Okay.
The balance sheet, for example, is all about addition. It's a snapshot of what a company owns and owes at a specific point in time. Then you have the income statement, which uses subtraction to calculate profit, taking revenue and deducting expenses.
Okay, I see how those basic operations apply to the financials, but what about multiplication and division? How do those fit into the picture?
That's where Lou Runn's creative analogies come in. He refers to multiplication as different dimensional cooperation. It might sound a bit abstract, but it's a really insightful way to think about collaboration in a business context.
Okay.
He uses Shell, the oil and gas giant, as an example.
I'm all ears. How does Shell use multiplication to succeed?
Well, Shell breaks down its vast operations into specialized roles: exploration, extraction, refining, distribution, each operating in a different dimension of the business. It's the coordinated effort, the multiplication of these different skill sets and specialized departments that make the whole system work.
That's a great example. So it's not just about individuals working harder. It's about the synergy created when specialized roles work together. Each area contributing its expertise to the overall equation, multiplying the effectiveness of the whole.
Precisely. Think of it like a well-oiled machine where each cog plays a specific role in keeping the entire mechanism running smoothly.
This makes me think about how we can apply this concept to, smaller teams, even individual roles. Instead of trying to do everything ourselves, perhaps the key is to identify those areas where collaborating with others, each bringing their unique dimension to the table, could lead to that multiplicative effect on the results.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that we don't have to be experts in everything. Sometimes strategic collaboration can be far more impactful than trying to go it alone. But are you ready to add another dimension to this mathematical journey?
Oh.
Let's move on to Chapter 3, where Luron introduces the Cartesian coordinate system.
Cartesian coordinates. Okay. I'm flashing back to high school math class right now. But seriously, what do X and Y axes have to do with making better business decisions?
It's all about how we visualize and categorize information. Think about a common business dilemma. Should you hire someone with a good attitude or someone with strong skills?
Right. It's an age-old question.
Luron suggests using a 2D coordinate system where one axis represents attitude and the other represents ability.
So you're saying we can actually plot potential employees on a graph to make better hiring decisions. I'm picturing a scatter plot of candidates right now.
Exactly. By plotting employees on this graph, you can categorize them into 4 distinct groups.
Okay.
Those with high ability and a great attitude are your stars. Then you have rabbits who have a great attitude but lack the necessary skills. Those low on both are dogs. And lastly, you have those with high ability but a poor attitude, your wild dogs.
Okay, that's a pretty vivid way to picture the different types of employees you might encounter. So how does this coordinate system actually help you make better hiring decisions?
It forces you to think beyond just skills or just attitude. It provides a framework for assessing the overall potential of a candidate. Microsoft, for example, famously says, "We hire attitudes and train skills."
So they're looking for those rabbits, who they can then develop into stars. They believe that a positive attitude is fundamental and that skills can be taught. This coordinate system is a really practical tool for visualizing and making sense of those hiring decisions.
It's about recognizing that different situations might call for different types of employees. Sometimes you need a star to lead the charge, while other times you might need a rabbit who can learn and grow within a specific role. Now let's shift gears and explore Chapter 4, which delves into exponents and powers.
Exponents and powers. Okay, we're getting into some serious math territory now, but I'm trusting you to guide us through this. What insights does Luron offer about how these concepts play out in the business world?
This chapter focuses on understanding growth, particularly the concept of exponential growth. And one key idea Luron introduces is the idea of front and back correlation. It's the idea that certain actions or decisions, particularly early on, can create a snowball effect leading to those exponential results.
So it's like setting the stage for massive growth down the line. Do you have any examples of companies that have successfully leveraged this front and back correlation?
Amazon's a great example. Early on, they invested heavily in building a robust logistics network. At the time, it might have seemed like an unnecessary expense, but this front investment in infrastructure allowed them to handle those massive volumes of orders later on, leading to that exponential growth they are known for today.
It's like they were playing the long game, making strategic decisions that wouldn't necessarily pay off immediately, but would create the conditions for massive growth in the future.
Exactly. And this ties into the power law distribution, also known as the 80-20 rule. This principle suggests that a small percentage of your efforts often produce the majority of your results.
So it's not about spreading your efforts evenly, but about identifying and focusing on those high-impact areas, those 20% activities that drive 80% of the results.
Precisely. It's about understanding that in business, not all efforts are created equal. Some actions have a much greater impact than others, and a large part of success is about identifying and focusing on those high-impact areas.
So how does this front and back correlation and the 80-20 rule connect back to the idea of exponential growth?
By understanding these principles, you can make strategic decisions that set you up for exponential growth down the line. It's about choosing the right track and then having the patience to stick with it, even if the results aren't immediately apparent.
So it's about recognizing those key leverage points, investing in them, and then allowing time to do its work.
Yeah.
It's a very different approach than, chasing quick wins or spreading yourself too thin.
Exactly. It's about playing the long game, being friends with time, as Lou Run puts it, and understanding that true sustainable success often takes time to build. Now let's move on to Chapter 5, where Lou Run dives into the concepts of variance and standard deviation.
Okay, variance and standard deviation. Those terms sound a bit intimidating. Can you break them down for us in a way that makes sense in a business context?
These are statistical tools that help us understand differences within a set of data. Variance measures how spread out the data points are from the average, while standard deviation is simply the square root of the variance.
So it's about understanding how much variation there is within a given set of data. But how does this apply to the business world?
Lee Ren suggests that understanding variance can actually help improve management efficiency. And he does this by distinguishing between reducing unnecessary variance and increasing essential variance. For example, he compares driving a car to taking the subway.
Okay, I'm following. Driving involves a lot of variance, right? Traffic, weather, unexpected detours. All of these can affect your arrival time. Taking the subway, however, offers a more controlled experience with less variance, allowing you to predict your arrival time with more accuracy.
Exactly. So in business, reducing unnecessary variance might involve streamlining processes, standardizing procedures, or implementing quality control measures to ensure consistency.
It's about eliminating those unpredictable variables that can disrupt operations and decrease efficiency.
On the other hand, there are times when increasing variance is actually beneficial. Think about fostering creativity within a team.
Right. If everyone thinks the same way and follows the same rigid procedures, you're likely to stifle innovation. You need that diversity of thought, a certain level of controlled chaos to spark new ideas.
Exactly. Lou Run also highlights how standard deviation is crucial for quality control.
This makes me think about experiences with inconsistent product quality. You buy your favorite brand of coffee expecting a certain flavor, but one batch tastes completely different from the next. That's high variance, and it can be really detrimental to a brand.
Absolutely. By understanding and managing standard deviation, businesses can ensure greater consistency in their products and services, which leads to higher customer satisfaction and loyalty. Now are you ready to dive into the world of probability and statistics?
Bring it on. I'm starting to see how these mathematical concepts can actually be quite useful in a business setting. So we've talked about variance and standard deviation. But Chapter 6 takes us even deeper into the world of data, with probability and statistics. And this is where Lou Run makes a pretty bold statement. Entrepreneurship is probability management.
Yeah, it's a powerful way to frame it, It really shifts our thinking away from the idea that entrepreneurship is all about just having a brilliant idea.
Right.
And more about, understanding and navigating the inherent uncertainty of the market.
So it's less about guarantees and more about making calculated bets. Right.
Exactly. Lou Run encourages entrepreneurs to embrace what he calls probability thinking, which is really about assessing the potential risks and rewards of different options and choosing the path with the highest expected value.
So you're not just looking at the potential upside, but also factoring in the likelihood of different outcomes, both positive and negative.
Precisely. It's about making informed decisions based on the best available information, even when there are no guarantees. A great example of this is how venture capitalists operate. They invest in many startups knowing that most will fail.
It seems counterintuitive, but I'm guessing there's a mathematical logic behind it.
Absolutely. VCs understand that even though the probability of any individual startup succeeding might be low, the potential payoff from the few that do succeed is so high that it outweighs the losses from the many that fail. They're essentially playing the odds, leveraging probability in their favor.
It's a fascinating approach to risk and reward. They're not afraid of failure. They see it as an inevitable part of the process. But they make sure those few big wins more than compensate for those inevitable losses along the way.
Exactly. Another key concept in this chapter is conditional probability. It emphasizes the importance of updating our beliefs and decisions as new information becomes available.
It's like that saying, the only constant is change. We need to be flexible and adjust our course as the landscape shifts around us.
That's a great way to put it. Lou Run also highlights how statistics can help us identify and avoid common mental traps that can lead to bad decisions. Things like the base rate fallacy, Simpson's paradox, and survivor bias.
These are those sneaky biases that can really trip us up, even when we think we're being completely logical. It's a reminder that we're not always as rational as we think we are.
By understanding these biases, we can make more informed decisions and avoid those mental pitfalls. But are you ready to step into the world of strategic decision-making with game theory?
Game theory.
Hmm.
That sounds intense. What does Lou Run have to say about how it applies to the business world?
In Chapter 7, Lou Run explains that game theory is really about understanding how decisions interact in a competitive environment. It's not just about what you do, but also how your decisions influence and are influenced by the choices of others.
So it's like a strategic chess match where you need to anticipate your opponent's moves.
Exactly. He introduces concepts like the payoff matrix, which outlines the potential outcomes of different decision combinations, dominant strategies, which are the best choices, regardless of what your opponent does, and the Nash equilibrium, where no player can improve their outcome by unilaterally changing their strategy.
Those are some pretty complex ideas. Does he offer any real-world examples to illustrate how these concepts play out?
He uses the pig game to illustrate the freeloading strategy and the chicken game to explain how sometimes convincing your opponent that you are a little bit crazy can actually lead to a favorable outcome.
Those examples sound entertaining, but also a bit unnerving. Is he suggesting that we should all embrace a little bit of craziness in our business dealings?
Not necessarily. The point is that even seemingly irrational decisions can be successful if you understand the underlying game theory at play. It's about recognizing that your decisions don't exist in a vacuum. They're part of a complex web of interactions.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the underlying logic II, what's the big takeaway for our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway is that math isn't just an academic subject. It's a powerful tool for understanding the forces that shape the business world. Lou Run encourages us to develop a mathematical mindset, to think critically challenge assumptions, and look for those underlying patterns that drive success in business.
It's about using math not just to crunch numbers, but to gain a deeper understanding of how things work, to make better decisions, and to navigate the complexities of the business world.
And you know what? I think that's a great place to wrap things up.
I agree.
It's been a fascinating deep dive into the world of business and math. We've learned so much from Lou Run and the underlying logic, too.
Definitely. There's always more to explore.
And hopefully our listeners will be inspired to continue that exploration on their own. So until next time, keep those brains buzzing. And remember, there's always more to learn.